you. Probably upset that person already. I'm going to mute all. Okay. Sorry about that. Just muting everybody. Make sure we're all in the same sort of place, in the same way. Jerry is the only one who has his speaker on at any one time, if he can. Thank you, Jen. That's lovely. You're getting headphones. That's perfect. Welcome, everybody. Just see who else is coming in. While people are coming in, can I please remind you of the basics and the rules? And that is, please, if you've got anything to say, please put yourself on mute. I can't keep doing it. It will take me forever. Please don't comment on anybody else's appearance or anybody else's situation or what they look like. Don't say to somebody, hey, you've got a gorgeous smile. Hey, do you fancy chatting, or any of those things. Like, other people's appearances, bits and pieces, are none of your business. This is a therapeutic space. It's not a pickup space. So please think about other people and think about how they feel. So people are saying hello, thank you very much, and good evening. And Queerly Quiet is very excited about the topics for today. I better make it up well as I go along then. Cinda says hello everyone, and Zoe says, do you want to change the messaging at the side? Have I not done that yet? Participants can chat with is it everyone? I think it goes like that. Thank you. And Luke saying hello. And Cindy says, oh yeah, I can message everyone. Please don't message anyone privately. It's disrespectful. As I said, this is not a pickup place. So thanks, so that's really helpful. I'm really tired today. I don't know why. So if I feel a little lackluster, I'm really sorry. I'll try and pick myself up and get as excited as I normally get when I do these things, and not be able to go to bed for at least 2 hours afterwards, because that's the way I normally am. Because I get really buzzy after these things. If you have anything to add, please write it down the side. Jerry wrote, have a Coke. Yep. I have got one. My youngest has just been confirmed with COVID, and my next daughter up, her girlfriend is here, and she thinks she might have COVID, and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. So she's gone for a test. So it's like, come on. I don't think she has, but we'll see. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We've got 3 different subjects. 3 different subjects we've got are eating disorders. I'm just going to generalize view of eating disorders. If anybody's got a story to tell or wants to say something like, eating and drinking really healthily, please do. I did just hold up my can of Coke. So we're talking about eating disorders a little bit, and I might talk about eating disorders on the scene actually as well a little bit, just of my own personal interpretation. So please feel free to add anything by writing down the side. We're going to be talking about exit strategies for long-term MS and DS relationships and the possible issues that can come up. It's not as exciting as it sounds, but hopefully we'll make it semi-exciting. And we're also going to talk about, how do you create a long-term relationship with kink in it? Do you start with play? Do you get to know somebody? Do you have sex first? What do you hold off on? What do you do? How do you connect? And how do you avoid unwanted precedents? If you don't dive in head first, what do you do? So that's what we're talking about. And next week, we've already got, how do you overcome a betrayal from a daddy? Now, of course, that daddy could be a mummy. It could be a partner. It could be anyone. So I think generically, we're going to be talking about betrayal. But first of all, for today, let's, Ms. Vegan Vixen says, thanks for holding space to discuss great topics. You're really welcome. I hope that we all like them, and I hope we've got a lot to say on them. So let's talk about eating disorders. First of all, can I say the most important thing about eating disorders? They've got fuck all to do with food. You cannot cure them by giving an anorexic a fry-up. Please don't do that. And you cannot say to somebody who's vastly overweight, fuck me, you should take a bit of exercise, love, or go on a diet. No, definitely not. Never works. Those things aren't relevant. Eating disorders are, depending on the level you've got, what you have in any way, shape or form, are a mental illness. And they affect all ages, all genders, all ethnicities, and all backgrounds. However, the most likely group of people to have an eating disorder are actually younger women. Anorexia is still the biggest psychological killer of young women, kind of under the age of 28, so that's a really big deal. However, there is a massive upsurge of women in their 40s and 50s starting to get anorexia as well. That's changing. There's also a 40% increase in cis-born men, people identified as cis-born men. There's a 40% increase in the last 2 years before COVID, increase in male eating disorders as well. So everything to do with eating is on the up. So we really have to look at that. I found this stat on eating disorders, which gives the numbers of deaths globally. Thanks. It's a horrendous set of figures. I mean, it's quite triggering if you want to read that. I don't know if I would want to read that. So your behavior might be very interesting around food, and it has nothing to do with food. I always say to people, this is a problem. You've seen me do this before. We have a problem. We try and fix it, and we try and make something good. And this is the eating disorder. We are trying to control something that's happening underneath. And then this kind of breaks off because it's not working for us anymore. And we come into therapy, or we go somewhere else, and we try and do something about this problem. And you'll come in and you'll often get this fixed without fixing this, which is a total waste of your time. This needs to be fixed. It's the underlying causes, the roots, the reasons, and why we feel that way. Eating disorders kind of like all sorts of things. So we're going to cover a couple of them and see what they're like and what they really mean, because everybody goes to, oh, all fat people are really unhealthy. Nah, not true. All really thin people are really unhealthy. That's not true either. What you're going to find, if you really look into eating disorders, actually, is you can get some very healthy larger people and some very healthy underweight people, and vice versa as well. But it also depends on what you mean by the word healthy. This is about a complex relationship with food, where food has become the focal point. If you were going to take this as a form of OCD, for example, you would say that food has become the obsession. But even with OCD, the obsession isn't the problem. It's the compulsion to run away from what you're feeling, from what's going on for you. And actually what you need to do, like Jerry is eating, is establish a really good regular pattern of eating. That's what you need to do. That's part of the cure for any form of an eating disorder, is a very good method of eating mixed with, let's look at what's going on underneath. If you have a young person who has an eating disorder, it's way better to get the family involved, and get the family involved quickly. I see a lot of kids with eating disorders. So if you want to know about me and eating disorders, for 5 years, I was the training director and the clinical supervisor of an eating disorders clinic on Harley Street and on Wigmore Street. So this is one of my fields. I would also say, please do not go to a therapist who has no experience of disordered eating or any form of eating disorder. It is quite a specialist area. They need to understand quite a lot about nutrition. They need to understand quite a lot about the physiological impact on the body. And a lot of us treat it and say, yeah, no, I've done this before, I know it. Really, how do you? Makes a difference. I mean, bachelor's cup of pasta. You're eating, oh, okay, fair enough. But do you know, that's okay. And it is okay. And we'll come on to that in a minute. Alice says, what when work doesn't allow set time frames to eat? Right. So that for me depends on the person, the work, and all sorts of other things. So I have clients who are anorexic or have binge eating disorder, or you have orthorexia or athlete's triad. We're going to come on to all of those in a minute if we get through them all. It's all about control. So what you'll also find sometimes is people who want control over their eating, or lack of control over their eating. There is irony, isn't there, when we talk about things like anorexia, for example, where we absolutely control our intake of food to say that I'm totally in control, but you're not in control, you're 5 stone. You can't possibly be in control. If you've actually lost control of the control, that's part of the problem. That's where it goes. So what a lot of people do is choose the sort of time frames within work that don't allow them to do that. I'm too busy, my work doesn't let me. Well, that's convenient, isn't it? I suggest you find something else, or I suggest you talk to your boss and say, I really need to eat. You have a right to eat within a set amount of time at work as well, actually, depending on how many hours you work. You have a right to eat, and there are lots of things you can do about that, but a lot of people don't want to put themselves out. There is always a way to grab something that is nutritional and good enough for you to help you get over a certain time frame, and it's about eating well before and after if you've got a lump of work where you can't as easily. So I'm always curious when people ask what when work doesn't allow set time frames. They don't necessarily have to be set, but they have to be within certain time structures. For sure, it makes a difference. So it isn't about feeling fat, or it is about big fat feelings. That's the thing you need to remember. Anything to do with food is to do with feelings, actually, nothing else whatsoever. I think we've got to be really careful about blame, saying, well, you know, they should do this, they should do that. Often there's a lot to do with families. Eating disorders will often come on to university students, or for university students. That's often an age that it comes up. So there are around 8 classified eating disorders at the moment, and it's forever growing. So Alice says, for instance, some days I get a chance to eat at 11, other days it's gone 3 p.m. Then I'm going to say to you, Alice, in the most brutal, horrific way, which I'm really well known for, is fucking make the time. Turn around and say to your boss, no, between this next job and this next job, I have to eat something. Give me 2 minutes. Even if you do, even if it's an apple with something, even if it's some apple and some peanut butter so you get a hit of sugar if that's necessary. There are lots of ways of doing things. So get a protein down, you get it mixed with a form of low index carbohydrate, or get something in that's got lots and lots of vitamins and minerals. Listen, I can't talk, I'm a fat woman. However, do I know my stuff? Yes. And am I a qualified dietitian? Yes. Can I just say that doesn't mean any at all. If you're a dietitian, it is a minimal form of qualification. For a nutritionist, sorry, if you want a dietitian, sorry, get my words around the right way, I'm a nutritionist. A dietitian has done a degree. That's completely different. And people who've studied eating disorders have to study an awful lot about food as well. I understand that, Alice, even if the person is, what we've got to learn to do is say, totally appreciate that, come in, give me 5 minutes. And actually, the more you get used to that, people push, it's like a system, people push you to do things and you can get to it. Ben Goldacre is a qualified, yes, you don't have to do a lot, you just have to take this little course to be a nutritionist. And it's just, you've got to be very careful. I see an awful lot of people who are experts in the field of food who have eating problems, and I see an awful lot of personal trainers who have eating problems as well. So that's quite interesting, isn't it, that it comes out in both of those, that wounded healer, that principle. So let's talk about a couple of different forms of eating disorders that you might or might not know about. Can I just say as well, just if I have a real problem when we talk about experience versus science. Experience is really valid. It really matters. I think it's got a part to play in anything, but I don't think it outweighs science or research. I'm probably going to get 3,000 anti-vaxxers on me now from that sort of thing as well. God, I might do, and that's okay. I might remove you because I just won't be able to handle it in the moment. I think it's really important to respect other people's opinions and views, but I'm always interested in the provenance. Where is your history? Where is your proof? What's that about? Science can get things wrong, for sure. Research can get things wrong, but just because it worked for you for 30 years, I wrote a thing recently about anal sex. And what a lot of people have written, well, not a lot, 2 or 3, listen to me, hyperbole. 2 or 3 people said, well, I've been fine for 30 years, so it's fine, it doesn't matter. Good for you. I'm really glad. Bravo. It doesn't mean it's good for everyone else. So I think you have to look at things slightly differently. Anecdata is not data, let alone evidence. I would agree with that, Mark. I like that. Do you know what? That's the first time I've heard anecdata. So there you go. I've learned something today and I really like that. Let's start with one of the most common eating disorders, which people know, which everyone knows about, which is anorexia or anorexia nervosa. So anorexia nervosa is all about limiting and controlling food and food intake. Interestingly, not everybody who has anorexia is tiny. People start somewhere. If they are limiting food, they could be 20 stone and be anorexic. We just classify it as, well, no, hang on. So they limit how much they eat. They limit how much they drink. They will probably limit or do lots of excessive exercise. They can be very likely to use laxatives and create and induce vomiting. While I was working on Harley Street, one of the worst cases I saw for laxative use was 120 a night. 120 laxatives a night. And actually, if you look at all the research in laxatives, that doesn't work. Because if you look at red markers for how much calorific content we take in when we do eat something, even if we binge, I'm afraid it's too late. By the time you get to having it all through your system, those laxatives won't help a lot either. Some people, even with anorexia, will binge and purge in their own way, eat an awful lot and do different things. It's all right, Oyster. You're quite welcome for being late. We're talking about eating disorders, and we just started with anorexia a little bit. So anorexia, what people get confused about, this was on the scene as well, is body dysmorphia and body dysphoria. So body dysmorphia is when you don't see your body for what it is. Body dysphoria is when I don't fit in this body and it's not right for me. They're very different things. Very different things. So somebody who feels they're the wrong gender will suffer from body dysphoria, and somebody who isn't good about their body or their shape is dysmorphia. I can look in a mirror and think, I look pretty good today. That's pretty fucking dysmorphic, trust me, because I like myself and I like my shape and my size, and I'm overweight. Those both things go together. But I look at myself and I go, damn, I'm all right. So that is slightly dysmorphic in its own way. So we can do it all different ways. So Jerry said, presumably laxatives just help evacuate the bowels. Too late, the food has already been through your stomach and intestines. Correct. But the idea is if I get rid of a lot of it, we'll also get rid of a lot of weight. When anorexics are weighed, which they often are in clinics, they have all sorts of tricks. The old tricks used to be when we used to have things like curtains with net weights in, where they used to have these things called net weights at the bottom of curtains. They would cut the bottom and pull the net weight out. And they will happily put the net weight inside them because nobody's going to check anything personal, and all sorts of little tricks that they could do, little weights and things. And of course their water binge before they're weighed as well. Drink a shit ton of water, then bring it up, and that can cause a lot of issues with their brain as well. So it's very difficult to just simply diagnose anorexia because it's a lot more complex than that. You might have a normal weight for your height, your gender, and different things as well. So you might have something like atypical, or you might have what people are now calling an OFSPED, which is an other specified feeding or eating disorder. And that's becoming more and more popular, OFSPED. So we'll come to that one in a minute. Is anorexia serious? Yes, it's absolutely serious. By the time you stop eating and you undereat, so what people do is they'll put themselves on a very low calorie diet. A very low calorie diet is a percentage of undereating compared to what you would eat normally. And what you have to think about when it comes to this sort of thing is, if anyone who wants to lose weight, who starts to say things to me like, oh, I'm just going to eat 1,400 calories a day, really bad for you. If you want to lose weight, you need to eat. Honestly, you do. It is the opposite to what people think. If I starve myself, it'll be okay. That causes all sorts of different problems in the body. It causes massive changes in our brain. In fact, anorexia is one of the major eating disorders that changes some of the patterns in our neural pathways and actually changes how our brain is. So it's incredibly serious. It will certainly eventually impact your work, your relationships, if you're in education, or anything else as well. You probably will have a non-existent sex drive that will go down dramatically. Your digestive system will start to shut down. Your reproductive system will start to shut down. So there are a lot of implications. What drives me mad when it comes to fetish is fetishization of size, whether it's large or small, whether we have feeders or people who want to control people's weight. Sometimes you see some people who are so obsessed with getting someone as tiny as possible that they take over and they'll cause issues for the person. Let's get you to lose weight. Let's get you super fit. Let's get you doing all of those things. Mel says, I lost weight by accident as I worked 2 jobs in college and just ate quick food like sandwiches, crisps, and a snack. So you can lose weight on the amount of exercise. So basically, it is really about what comes in, what comes out, what we do, what exercise we do, and how it works. However, there is a certain point, even if you reduce what you're eating and you increase what you're doing, after a while, that weight loss will start to stop. So my youngest daughter is a really good example of this. She was very overweight, wanted to lose a lot of weight, and lost 6 stone in a year. And she lost 6 stone in a year purely by eating well and exercising, and then it stopped. And she wanted to lose another stone. And I said, great, we need to up your food. And she went, oh, fuck off. I went, no, we need to up your food. We need to up your food. We need to get you back up into good calories. I've been saying all the time, this isn't good, what you're doing. It will eventually tire out. And now she does CrossFit 3 or 4 times a week. She's eat a week. She's super fit. She is a completely different shape, and she eats 2,000 calories a day at least. And she's small, and it's all about getting it right. But we have this thing that goes around that says you need to be on a diet. Diets are fucking awful. A diet is what you eat every day. This is my diet today, if that's what I'm eating or drinking. This is my diet today. So is the spaghetti carbonara that my daughter made from scratch earlier. So that they're all my diets. They're what I eat. What we're talking about is restrictive, and it's not very good. You can change your psychological characteristics if you develop anorexia at the early age. The youngest anorexic patient I've had is 7 years old. 7 years old. And that's because her mum was very into losing weight and looking very beautiful, which is okay. I get that. But mum had anorexia. There are arguments that some of these things are now passed down. I talk a lot about epigenetics and genetics. And of course, it's environmental as well. She would play calorie wars with her brother every day, who was 5, to see who could eat the least. And it took a lot of work on her and her mum and the family. Summer said, one of the worst things I've seen on the internet was an anorexia fetish. Oh, listen, anosites are huge. The world's trying to shut them down, but they're called anosites for anorexia. They're really horrible. One of the worst things I've seen on an active forum, people would comment on photos of severely underweight women with sexual comments and things like she could lose a few more pounds. Absolutely. And it's also women on women as well. So please be aware that women will also go into this massively. You get a lot of people that have private Instagram and all sorts of things. What traits or elements need to be present to qualify as having an eating disorder? That 100% depends on the disordered eating that you have. It's when it's too much of a problem. If you, for example, separate your food because you don't want it touching, that might not bother you, but that could be a symptom of something. If you want your food dry because you don't want anything wet on it, or vice versa. If you start to restrict what you're eating, you could be on a diet. But if you become obsessive about it and you have to weigh everything and calculate everything, that could be a problem. It just varies depending on which disordered eating it is. I don't think it helps even that GPs, doctors recommend cutting calories. It's even on the NHS website. According to the NHS BMI2, I need to consume 1,002. Oh, fucking hell. I need to consume 1,250 calories a day. I don't pay attention to that since regularly eating. I have to eat 2,000 calories a day as I'm so hungry. 1,250 is a very low calorie diet. It will put your body potentially into ketosis, which is to say that there's not enough fat and carbohydrates going into your body, so your body starts to eat its own fat, really. You get a very distinctive smell. Your breath smells. It smells like ketones. It's almost like somebody who's about to have a diabetic attack, an insulin attack, but it is completely connected to insulin. I've come across a 4-year-old with a huge learned behavior anorexia, which is terrifying because it does change our brains. So, thought the trolling that Tess Holiday received following her saying she had a form of anorexia interesting. Pear drop smell. Yes, it is like pear drops. And it's also like nail polish remover, acetone. It's the same sort of thing. So we've got to be very careful. People who have symptoms of anorexia, of course, could be extremely underweight. Their ribs will show all sorts of different things and symptoms. But I've also said very clearly that actually a lot of them could be what you and I would consider an okay weight or an acceptable weight in some way, shape or form. So it'll be about restricting. Oh, no, I'm not going to eat while we're out. Well, when are you eating? Oh, I'll eat later. Don't worry. But I haven't seen you eat all day. And it's very hard to call people on this thing. It is not politically acceptable anymore. Or you watch people push their food around their plate. They'll cut it, but they won't quite eat it. They'll move it around, or they'll say, well, I don't want this bit. Who wants this? And it looks like they've eaten half. It'll also be controlling about, no, I don't want that. What was in it? What was in that? How did you make that? I need to see it made. And they'll do things like, can I see the recipe? Can I watch you make it? Can I see the menu before we go to a restaurant? What's on here? I'll have a salad, but I'll have no sauce. I do lots of things. 1,250 is ludicrous. In Lithuania, I've been told very clearly by a doctor that 2,000 calories is minimum for a human to survive. That's not quite true either. That whole thing about it must be 2,000 is all a bit difficult. From that person who's just sent me that message, I will talk to you about that privately, okay? I can do that, so that's not a problem. So, and I'll come on to that particular issue in a minute. So anorexia, it's really, really, really all about undereating. So the next sort of thing we have is Arfid. So ARFID. So Arfid is avoidant or restrictive food intake disorder, which is not quite anorexia because it isn't about body dysmorphia. It's about, no, I can only have that or I can't have that. So it might be that they're not very good around textures, smell, taste, different things. No, I'm not putting that in my mouth. Oh, that's absolutely revolting. And it's normally based on the senses and sensory perception of what food is like. So they tend to restrict, split things. I'm not having that. My second eldest partner hates baked beans. Absolutely. And in fact, baked beans are really common for one of these. He hasn't got Arfid because it's not about lots and lots of things. But if you put a baked bean on his plate, you go, I can't eat that now. So it's a food phobia. And there was a really interesting program that started last night on W, if you want to know about food phobias and different things as well, which is a completely different subject. And that's all about getting people used to things and teaching them to eat stuff, which can absolutely be done. But it's always about our senses. It might be that they choked on something when they were younger. We were in America 3 or 4 years ago. The first so we were doing the World Championships for cheerleading, and one of the girls couldn't take paracetamol, and she couldn't take paracetamol. She was 19. She couldn't take paracetamol because of a choking incident on a piece of sweet corn when she was younger. So she couldn't take anything along those lines. So eventually what we got her into was her managing to eat some form of food, and I taught her how to take a paracetamol, and it took 2 weeks. It was really interesting. We did have liquid paracetamol. It's completely possible. But if you've had a really distressing experience with a texture of food or anything else as well, that's what it's all about. It can also be that some people don't recognize their hunger cues. They might have a poor appetite and they just have a very low interest in eating their food. So, and there can be lots and lots of reasons. When people avoid or restrict, don't assume you know why, because you don't. I don't. They come and see me, I've got no fucking clue. I have to start with asking and talking to them. And it can take a long time for people to share these things. And of course, when we restrict or avoid food, it can also be linked to trauma. I have also met people who have been abused from a very early age, had a packet of sweets put in their hand, and of course they just eat sweets all the time. So there are lots and lots of causes and reasons for people to have disordered eating and eating disorder. So please don't think that you know, because you don't, because I certainly don't. Probably one of the most common ones that people suffer from is binge eating disorder. Now, a lot of people get overeating confused with binge eating disorder. So lots of people overeat, but when you binge, it's when you feel completely out of control with a lot of food in one hit, and they don't feel like they can stop it. And again, this hits everybody in every way. It's regardless of your religion, your race, your age, everything else as well. It's probably the most common form of eating disorder. So you'll eat a large quantity of food over a very short period of time, and that's what we call a binge. Unlike people with bulimia, you won't follow that with vomiting. You'll just keep it down in some way, shape or form, although you might feel not so good. And sometimes people might fast between their binges. And what a lot of people do in this situation, and actually undereating can cause binges. So what happens is somebody says, I need to eat less. I'm going to eat 1,200 calories a day. So for 2 days, you eat 1,200 calories. You reach day 3 and you think, fuck me, I'm really hungry. I'm starving. I really need to eat something. God, I really fancy something. You've restricted, you've created desire. You're not eating enough, and you go, do you know what? Fuck it. And then you eat a load of whatever. It doesn't matter what you're eating. I mean, I've seen binges that are like 30 packets of crisps, 20 cans of Coke, 3 or 4 main meals, 14 ice creams. It can be all sorts of things. But a binge can be a lot smaller for people. It's not always the size of the portion. It depends on the person as to what's a lot for them and what isn't. So we see this as well. There's also a lot of talk about morbidly obese and obese people on the scene. Oh, that's the only place they're accepted or whatever. I disagree with that strongly. I think the scene is a microcosm of the world out there anyway. That wouldn't work for the 2-5 diets, etc. Oh, let's get into starvation, shall we? We might hit that one in a minute if we've got enough time, but I don't think we will, because I'm not even through 3 or 4 of the eating disorders yet. So try and push through this really quickly. So binge eating disorder isn't about a large portion. It's or overindulging, which a lot of people who are overweight do. Oh, I fancy that, I'm going to have a bit more. Our brain doesn't quite say to us, hey, maybe don't. It is about absolutely disconnecting from what you're eating. It's about indulging and having a huge amount of food, often proportionately for some people, more than you would want to eat. And it's difficult to stop, and actually it can almost make you vomit as well sometimes. They can eat really quickly. They don't feel uncomfortable when they're full. They won't eat when they're hungry. They won't always eat in public either. They'll always do this privately so people can't see them. You have to have at least one binging episode a week for 3 months to be classified as somebody with a binge eating disorder. So that's the classification. Whereas anorexia is all about control and weight dropping eventually. That's how people classify anorexia, unless they're calling it something else. Depends. A lot of people have special foods for binges, certain things that they have. They definitely always have a ritual. They might sit down. They'll often do it in front of the TV. There will often be a distraction that happens for somebody to say, okay, I can eat mindlessly here, cover themselves with a load of food and go, I can eat this. Or they put a certain music on, a certain program, everything else as well. So that can happen as well. And there can be lots of reasons for people to binge eat. It can be overwhelming feelings, something really awful happened. It could just be boredom. It could be loneliness and upset. And ironically, people can also binge eat when they're really happy as well. So people just say, oh, it's a really depressing thing. It's not. It's about overwhelming feelings. binge eating tends to affect anyone. It's more common in adults than it is in really, really young kids, although it is getting younger. It tends to start in your 20s. I would argue that it's still getting younger, sadly. Polls for lurking, first time here. I find that I eat more and far too much binge if I don't have a chance to play. As soon as I get a chance to release my kink, I feel I need to eat less. Clearly the two are linked, but I've never cracked how to manage it. It's all about overcoming the emotional, overwhelming aspect. So when we eat, so what we're talking about there, MacBook, is the connection between a need for something. I need this, whatever it is. And when you play, that need gets satiated and met. When you don't play, you look for something else to satiate the need. And what we tend to do on the old emotional wave is we get a load of feelings that come up and we say, well, I can't do this. I can't do it. Fuck, shit, piss, bollocks. I really can't do it. God, I can't do it. And boom, over goes the wave. And you go, oh, I can actually. And on average, each wave takes around 20 minutes of severe controlling emotions if you're letting them out completely. If you're holding back on them, they'll last longer. So what we do, rather than getting over that little cusp of the wave, we tend to cut it off with something else. So that something else can be depression. That something else can be eating, not eating, controlling. I can't manage the not doing it. That's the thing. And ironically, it is all about extending time. One of the little tricks I like to teach people, it's a really simple one. God, this is not going to replace therapy, by the way. I'm just talking about a few tricks. Like, we really need to get into touch with what the fuck is the feeling. One of the things I talk about is if you have a very strong emotion and you binge eat or you control your eating and you feel that way about yourself afterwards, I'm really angry that I ate, I'm really sad that I ate, I'm really scared that I ate. That feeling was probably there before. So try and get in touch with the feeling when it was there before. What's that about? Oh, I'm really scared. Okay, what's the feeling? So feel the feeling, see what's going on. Oh, lots of feelings come up. The emotional wave goes and you think, fuck it, where's my Oreos or whatever? Like, because that's what we do. Or I'm not going to eat anything for the week. Forget it. I'm in control. I can do this. It changes and helps. What you'll see in a person is changes in their behaviors often and the way that they are before you'll see any physical symptoms. And then the physical symptoms start to come on. We automatically assume when we see someone who is fat that they absolutely have a binge eating disorder. What's a load of shit? That is not true. They might just overeat and overindulge. It doesn't mean they've got a disordered eating or an eating disorder. Why do we like ice cream when people have breakups? That's the thing. So what we like is an awful lot of fat and an awful lot of sugar, because if you look, there's a fantastic little video that goes around by Rachel somebody. What's her name? She does a little TED video. If you look up TED video, sugar, brain, and you'll find it's a TED talk. So what happens is you have all these things in your brain that really help, that we have hormones that are very, very clever. And I was talking about those earlier to do with subspace, actually. So we have lots and lots of hormones that help our brain send messages around and help how we feel. When we eat a shit ton of sugar, especially with a shit ton of fat, the fat helps transport it quicker. It's better for us to eat fat with sugar and fat with other things. Actually, fat isn't the terrible thing we think it is, neither is sugar by itself. None of these things are particularly awful in moderation. But the way it triggers the brain for the dopamine hit, for the way we feel, is akin to heroin and is akin to really, really strong drugs. So we fucking love it. So sugar, product placement, that's very true. Dopamine hit from food or from another fulfilling activity. If you've got it from the other thing, and I expect you need to get it less from food. Yes, but if you're used to just getting it from food, then that's what you'll put your efforts into. So we keep going and we keep making sure that that happens. The problem is obesity is not an eating disorder. Can we just get that clear? Because people say, oh, that's an eating disorder. No, it's not. However, it's interesting about what's that about and what I say, and that's what we need to look at. You've then got bulimia nervosa. I'm going through these as quickly as I can. So again, really serious mental illness. All of these are, again, hit everybody. So what people will do in this case is have a massive load of eating and follow that with purging. And that purging can be through vomiting, laxatives, diuretics, fasting. So it's a massive form of exercise. So it might be that somebody has 2 pots of ice cream, but then does 500 sit-ups, tries to do 20 pull-ups, good luck with one of those, or whatever it is that you're doing, unless you're really fit and active. Like, and you know what, like I know I'm going to do 45 burpees. You've just eaten ice cream, you're probably going to be very sick anyway. So bulimia is a different form of eating disorder. People will eat very, very quickly in order to purge, but that purge isn't always vomiting. People think it is. As I said, it can be laxatives, it can be exercise, it can be diuretics, it can be all sorts of things. And when people start to involve chemicals, things get very dangerous, especially with laxatives and especially with diuretics. That stuff can really, really fuck about with us. However, people with bulimia can also be quite a normal looking weight. We then have orthorexia, which a lot of people don't know about. So that didn't come until the late 1990s. And orthorexia is all about healthy eating. It looks really good. So I had a client who would eat normally. She looked like she ate really, really well. If you touched her, there was just skin and muscle. There wasn't anything else as well. She was running the equivalent to 60 miles a week in order to keep fit and doing all these different things, she put it. So orthorexia is a really unhealthy obsession with pure, good and wholesome food. You'll weigh it, you'll look at it. However, what is considered good and wholesome and pure and proper is very different for different people. And people see it differently. Oh, I'm like, some people say, oh no, I eat nuts because nuts are so full of good things and they're really great. And I haven't, other people go, oh my God, I'm not going to touch nuts because they've got these in. So, however, these people will subscribe to a very healthy eating plan, a very healthy eating relationship that they see. It's very healthy, it's good. And again, it's all about the control of the negative feelings and emotions on that emotional wave where we can't do it. One thing to help you over that emotional wave, apart from that feeling, like try and get into the feeling, is you score yourself out of 100. Let's say you're going to binge eat. How hungry are you? Fucking 100 out of 100. How much do you need those 14 cans of Coke? 100 out of 100. Okay. How long can you give me? I'm after 10 minutes as a minimum, but how long can you give me until you're going to eat that Coke or drink that Coke or have whatever it is that you're going to have? I can do 5 minutes tops. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you to do is for 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to go and do something preferably with your fingers. I want you to stitch, sew, paint, draw, do something else and include your fingers. And I want you to be quite happy with the thing that you're going to go and do. Clean eating had a whiff of orthorexia to me. It often does, Lola, it really does. It's all about control. It's very similar to anorexia, really. It just looks better to the world. And orthorexia might be diagnosed, and that can happen as well. And some people with orthorexia also have athlete's triad syndrome, which is people who tend to eat very clean, love that word, very healthily, and they are athletes. They've got a really good reason to do it. But often women athletes, they'll end up not having a period, which is a massive symptom of athlete's triad as well. So that makes a difference. So let's go back to one of these techniques. You score yourself out of 100. I want you to go and do something for 10 minutes, whether it's drawing, coloring, painting. Do something with your fingers. Go and write, go and draw, journal, do anything you want for those 10 minutes. So 10 minutes. Okay, off you go. Then I want you to score yourself again. How are you? So what you tell yourself is if you want to binge, you can absolutely binge if you want to. You could cook unless you're cooking shit tons of baking and you're making 300 muffins ready to eat. Depends on what you're cooking and what you're trying to do. So that depends. What you'll find is a lot of anorexics will cook. I have an anorexic client who works for Brighton and Hove football team. You'll never know her in a million years. But on the side, she's got a cake business. Clever, eh? She makes all these beautiful cakes for all these beautiful people all the time, and she feeds them. She never eats them herself, and she has severe anorexia. Very, very, very underweight. So cooking, not so much. Depends. So you score yourself. You go and do something else with your fingers. This, opposable thumbs, is really important. You do something with this. That's not texting. It's writing. It's journaling. It's drawing. It's sketching. It's doing something else. We look at why Victorian women were potentially, apart from being histrionic some of the time, hence fucking machines were invented, but when they're actually there's quite a lot of contentment. But if you look at what Victorian women did every evening was use these. It's very bizarre. They would draw, they would knit, they would sing, and singing really brings up your endocannabinoid system and makes you feel really good. They would do everything with their hands. They would sew or play something or do something. So they had a really different feeling about these sorts of things. So you go and do something. Then you sit down and you say to yourself, okay, I can binge if I want to. However, I'm going to binge on my kitchen table with everything else in front of me in a very controlled way, without any music, without any distraction. And every mouthful I take, I'm going to ask, am I enjoying this? Do I want this food? What does it taste like? You're going to slow it all down. So you can have it. You can eat what you like with these provisos. So you're not saying no to yourself. You're saying yes, with a few bits added to it. And if someone says, well, that's not going to work, you haven't tried it yet, and actually it fucking does most of the time. So and it doesn't work for everybody. It's just one small thing that you can do. Fuck, I really need to go fast. It's already 7:40. Where's the time going? I can't talk any quicker. So you then score yourself again. If your score is 99.9, or if it's moved even the slightest bit, you say, that's amazing. I'm going to give myself another 10 minutes, and I can still have the binge if I want to in another 10 minutes. And you just keep going. And once you've hit 10 or 20 minutes, that really massive thing can actually change and go in. I have a massive writing on shame, which is actually really meant about eating disorders. It's all about it. So you'll find that shame, yes, there you go. There's my writing on shame. And that's what it's taken from. It's a massive piece all about shame. Shame is one of the biggest reasons we eat. So the feelings of shame get converted into beliefs in the body, and that's when and what we have to do. That is a really good writing on shame, and I'm sure the other one is as well. So you have orthorexia. You also then have different other forms that you can get as well. So you've got Arfid. Arfid is an other specified form of eating disorder that we can't quite diagnose. We can't say quite what it is. It's an umbrella term for all these things. It could be that people have a night eating syndrome, or they have a morning eating syndrome, or it could be that they have, I don't know, purging sometimes, but without the overeating. They just purge at times. So again, all of these things are a mental illness. I'm not talking about people who overeat or undereat. Pica is another form of disordered eating that people have. Pica, you might have heard it as well. And that's when people eat things that have no nutritional value. So that can be things like earth. You could argue that has some nutritional value. They might eat soap. They might eat paper. They might eat coal, like all sorts of things. Chalk is a really popular one because it's crunchy in the way it melts in the mouth, and ice. So my second eldest daughter is super fit, super active. You could argue that she has pica because she chews ice all the time. She loves it, but it's not causing her a problem. She can go for months without doing it, just really likes it. It does cause a problem when we go to a cheerleading competition, because when she goes into Starbucks or wherever it is where you're and says, can I have a cup of ice? So do the 300 cheerleaders that are following her, and they just don't have enough ice. But that's there as well. There is also a form of rumination disorder, which is all about thinking and thought stuff, which is different around food. And that is where we will eat something partially, spit it out sometimes. That's one of the things we do, or we'll vomit it before we've eaten it. Damn it, you've just made me recall how I'd eat wallpaper as a kid when I was about 3, and I wonder I have an eating disorder. Maybe. What? So the question is, why did you eat the wallpaper? So like if we're picking at wallpaper because we're uncomfortable, because our parents are arguing or something feels really bad, and then we ate that and that made us feel full, that might have made us feel nice. That might have been comforting. So it's always going to be associated with something in some way, shape or form. Rumination disorder, we don't really know why it's there. It's forming a cause of sickness. It can also be this sort of, it's not like having a bug. It's so this is pretty gross. So what some people will do is chew, half swallow, regurgitate it, chew, swallow, vomit it back up again. So it's a constant re-chewing and doing different things. So it's quite horrible. So it's partially digested vomiting, really. That's one of those things that they do. There's no illness. It's not like you've got a stomach flu or something wrong with you. A lot of people who've got some kind of rumination disorder when it comes to food won't eat before they go out because they want to do it. They will be very malnourished because they're not actually swallowing anything to do with the food. And actually, by the time you've half swallowed, regurgitate, up again, up and up, that makes a massive difference. And my next point I was going to make was going to be that writing on shame, because shame is the base of any eating disorder. It's the feeling of not being okay. And the answer to it is compassion. It is always the answer. And I think it's in that writing as well. So if you want the solutions to it, please go to that writing and have a look and see what you think as well, because it's half of the key. And of course, when we undereat or overeat, that gives us all sorts of other problems in our bodies. We can cause diabetes. We can cause so like when I start people eating, if they're severely anorexic, sometimes I can get up to 6,000 to 10,000 calories a day just to try and get them eating again, to get there. And they don't put any weight on, because all of that is going into their body to try and re-stimulate, to make them better, which is, it's crazy when you think about it, isn't it? People are eating 6,000 calories a day. but no, not putting any weight on, but your body's trying to heal itself, your digestive system, your reproductive system, all of those things. And those people will have huge issues around temperature flashes, hot flushes, all sorts of different things. And of course, if you do know someone who isn't eating, please don't tell them to eat all of a sudden. There is something called Refeeding Syndrome, which is really serious and it can kill someone. It plays with their potassium. Again, this is all about knowing about nutrition or being a dietitian. If you encourage somebody who hasn't eaten for ages and you sit them down and you think you're doing them a favor with a big meal, you could kill them. Don't do it. Like that, really seriously, you can make somebody very ill if you make them eat if they haven't eaten for ages. The same as, for example, if you try and interfere with an alcoholic who's on over 20 units of alcohol a day and you stop them dead, you can give them a heart attack. So don't ever lock someone up who's saying, oh, I know I'm drinking 3 bottles of whiskey a night. Say, well, I'm fucking taking them away. I've sorted you out, haven't I? No, actually, you've just caused their death, potentially. Not always. Again, not always. But this is really important. Don't interfere unless you know what you're doing. I know you think you're doing something really nice, but interfering with an alcoholic who's on over 20 units, let a professional deal with them who knows how to bring the units down gently, who knows what to do to make up for the lack of those things that they're not getting. And it's the same with anorexia. There are ways to feed people through anorexia, and there are different ways of doing it. So notice as rumination sounds like it could lead to health problems because this is not how human body works. Cows do this, but they have 5 stomachs. Yes, it will. All of them will cause health problems. Absolutely everything I've mentioned will cause some form of health problem. Cinder says, Lona, not sure where you are based, but here in the UK, there is a dieting business that encourages its members to eat according to the number of bad points within the food it has listed. What is so bad, though, that it's according to their point system, you can eat as many potatoes as a day because they have no points. It's really awful. Look, there's no such thing as a bad food. If you want a piece of cake, have a piece of cake. If you cause restriction, it causes a serious problem. What we need to do is teach people to eat healthily, differently, and enjoy their food in different ways. Being constantly told to eat or how to eat, even when it's well-intentioned, increases the shame for those who already have eating disorders. I agree. However, there's a real irony here. In order to get better, we have to increase shame to decrease shame. So when you work with somebody, it's a really complex issue. You have to work with the shame and other people telling you to eat. But me as a therapist, when I sit, we are going to have conversations about what could be eaten. I'm never going to use the word should, and not when I'm dealing with somebody directly, and what could not be eaten and what is possible. How we expose, what do we do? How do we make a difference? And honestly, if you ask most recovered eating disorder human beings, they'll all tell you that a regular pattern of food really made them feel better, that it made a difference to their lives, that they felt a lot better for it. And that will make a real difference. But it's always based in shame, for sure. Okay. Any questions about eating before we go on quickly, or eating disorders? I think I've covered the main chunk of them. That's what they are. They're always to do with feelings and emotions. They're never to do with anything else. In fact, I have said publicly, you give me somebody with an eating disorder, once we've come out the other end and I've worked with them, if they can prove to me that it was about the food, I'll give them all their money back. 100% guaranteed. Here you go. I've said it publicly. I've said it all the time. Haven't found one yet, and I've been doing this for over 50, 60,000 hours. It's not about the food. There may be issues connected with the food, but the actual issue isn't about the food. It never is. It's always to do with not feeling okay, not being able to manage your own feelings. Cinders, I live in London, but I have not heard of such a dieting business, but it's not surprising. You've got to remember the diet industry is fucking huge. The diet industry wants you to buy its shit. So it tells you all these things that you should and shouldn't do, and they don't know what they're talking about half the time. I think there's a lot of bollocks sold to us in many ways. Yeah, that's what I've just said. I also think there's articles about diet should be banned in women's magazines. So should the criticism, and it's not just women. So like, somebody said something earlier about is the opposite to clean eating, dirty eating. I think it was you, Lola. The problem is there is such a thing as a dirty binge. What you've got in a lot of young men, and I am being gender specific here, is they will dirty binge before they go to the gym. Because what they're hoping will happen, so they'll binge anywhere between 1,000 to 3,000 dirty calories, like a massive greasy Mackie, whatever it is, like 3 or 4 Mackie D's or whatever. What they actually then do is they then work out massively to try and push their workout and to try and bulk up really quickly. It is not the best way to do it. However, if you look at someone like Dwayne Johnson or The Rock, he probably eats 10 to 12,000 calories a day to keep his size up at that sort of level that he's eating and doing. And then we're pushing, you should eat more protein, you should eat more protein, do protein shakes, do protein shakes. Okay, I mean, do you look at what's in a protein shake? Fuck me. If you feel that strongly about it, have a fucking steak for breakfast. I'm sorry if you're a vegetarian. But, you know, like, come on. Like, let's educate ourselves and educate ourselves properly. I know a DS couple, sub is recovering from an eating disorder and the dom oversees their eating. Oh, God. Okay. I feel uncomfortable about that. Could it help? Yes. However, what happens when the DS breaks? So if you have somebody who then takes over the control of the eating issue, and they break up, that sub is very likely to react against it and go straight back into what was, because although they're eating healthily, they haven't learned what's at the core of what's happening with their feelings and why they have disordered eating. If you don't do that, if you just do it on the eating level, I 100% guarantee that your food issues will come back. Your eating issues will come back. I think it's a lovely idea in some respects because actually they're eating healthily. That's fantastic. That's a really good start, but it is scratch. Where and see someone about what the fuck is going on underneath, and actually stands a better chance of doing well because they're actually eating healthily at the same time, because I say eating underneath really doesn't impact our brains. If the diet industry works, there wouldn't be any profits. Exactly. So it's all about shame. Why do so many people turn to food to deal with it? Because it's completely and utterly easily available. It's in our everyday lives. It's the one thing we can control. So if you've got somebody who is a child and doesn't know how to control anything around them, they can't buy stuff, they don't have money, they don't have access to drugs, they don't have access to alcohol. I would hope not, but someday. So what you will find is the one thing everybody has easy, constant access to. I understand there are people who don't have a lot of food as well, so let me just clarify that. I never say all the time, is food. So food is there. And food is nature, food is nurture, food is everything you're given. And food is often given as a reward for children. You've been a good girl, you've been a good boy, you've been a good human, have this. If you eat all your dinner, you can have your pudding. Think about the way food is sold to us on every single level and every single advert. You know, this isn't just any food, this is M&S. You know, like, wow, we're all going for that, aren't we? Because I think I've just been fucked by a cucumber. Jesus Christ. Probably an aubergine or something slightly larger. But it's so, like, you know, this isn't just any aubergine, this is an M&S aubergine. And so, like, it's really, you know, we have to understand that food is sold to us as everything all the time. Because food is the ultimate comfort since being a baby, yep, and also the hardest addiction to heal because you can't just stop eating, not like smoking or drinking alcohol. Correct. That is one of the big things that's always around us. But that DS couple. So let's talk about exit strategies for long-term MS and DS relationships, possible issues. I mean, can anyone guess what I'm going to say about an exit strategy? Does anyone know me that I might start with this? Fucking pre-mortem it. There you go. There's the word. The way to deal with an exit strategy is to do it at the beginning. Pre-mortem. I'm really sorry. So thank you very much, though. So when we have DS or MS, we are talking about transferring power to somebody else. Can I still point out that even as a sub, that is not a legal reason for you not to be responsible for yourself. If your dom said, please don't chop off that person's nose or head or whatever, then you're going to have a problem, aren't you? Because you are still legally liable. You are responsible for yourself and those different things. We have to have some responsibility for ourselves. One of the ways to do this is to pre-mortem at the beginning. Pre-mortem is planning a strategy with all the possible outcomes at the very front at the beginning. So exit strategies for long-term MS, especially even more than DS relationships where somebody's got total power, especially when we're micromanaging somebody. Can I go to the toilet? Can I do this? Can I brush my hair? Can you do this? Can you do that? Someone's just written me a private message. I'm not going to say who it is. They said, I've eating disorders all of my life since I can't get into counselling. I'm trying hardest on my end to change my relationship. The problem now is that due to extreme work stress, I have ulcers again, so I had to stop doing keto. And I keep switching between binging and not eating. Food makes me sick. Yes, you need to eat consistently, and I would recommend that you're not on keto either. If you're on keto, you are putting your body into starvation and causing it to hold on to fat cells. Write to me privately, that person, and I'll try and help you out a little bit as well. So if you just drop me a line on Fat Life, I will try and help you with some of that. Of course, I'm not replacing therapy, but what you're doing is actually going to make you more sick. So I'm just saying. So long-term exit strategies for long-term serious MS power exchange type relationships. So Pre-morteming is the way. Think about the things about how we then get into these things and how they start and the amount of dependency that we create. If you want to control your partner's orgasms completely and make them dependent upon you, for fuck's sake, think about if and when you break up. Let's face it, statistically, it's more of a when. I would love to go with if more, but let's say, somebody said to me when I wrote a post the other day, fuck me, you live at a 5, you need to chill out type thing. They didn't quite say that, I'm exaggerating it, but but they're not wrong. I planned for a 5 so I can live at a 2. I want to chill out and relax, knowing that this stuff is in place, knowing that there is a safety net there. Look, just because we plan it as well doesn't mean the other person will always do it for us. So let's take extremes like tying orgasms in. Your orgasm will come back eventually when the other person leaves or you leave the person. It might take up to a year. Can do. It might cause a very serious issue. You might need to see a psychosexual psychotherapist. That might make a real difference as well. So, however, it will come back. It's not like brainwashing. Brainwashing, that's such a contentious thing in the psychological world. Can we convince people to do things? You have willingly tied this in. You have willingly said, this is what I'm going to do. Over time, your orgasms will come back. Not trying is a really good idea. Toning it down is a really good idea, and changing what you're doing. If you are in a kind relationship, what you can do is start to change the DS momentum if you know you're coming towards a break. It could be that someone records something for you. You're only allowed to use it every so often. It could be that they start to withdraw. Pre-mortem is more like to make it an if rather than a when. I really agree with that, Namori. That makes a real difference. It's much more likely to happen. If you plan for it, it's more likely to be better, so your relationship's better in the first place anyway, when we discuss these things. So discuss the exit strategy at the beginning. Think about all the things you're tying in. If the person lives with you and they're financially dependent on you, what's the plan? Look, if you start controlling the person's money, think about this. Don't just take their money and spend it. If you take your submissive's money, put it in a savings account, treat it like rent, give it back to them at the end with fucking interest. Leave someone better off than you had them. Make sure they've got a deposit for a place if they live with you. Or also think about dying. You know, I've met a lot of people who've been very tied in, very slave-like to people, where there is a contract with another master or another mistress or another somebody that they've met that they will be passed on to in a really safe way. Now, a lot of us will say, fuck, you know, no one needs that way. But yes, they do. Some people do. Some people really have that level of dependency set up. So we need to work out ways of doing this at the beginning. Think about what you're about to do. Go slow. Please go slower than you think you should do even. If you're going to tie in a lot of this person's functioning with you as a human being, you need to be responsible for how you're going to reduce and decrease it at the end. If antidepressants are a really good example of this. You take antidepressants and you get lots of side effects, and then slowly but surely the side effects wear off. When you want to come off antidepressants, you preferably need to do it slowly because the side effects will come back and you slowly get used to what's happening. So if you are really doing a power exchange relationship and you are a responsible person, think about the incline up, but think about the incline down at the end. Ways of doing it. Have discussions. Have discussions about, okay, I'm going to start you brushing your hair slowly but surely. I'm going to stay with you through this, even though we're not together in a power exchange relationship anymore. We're going to spend the next 6 months getting you out of it because we took 6 months to get you in it. The likelihood of this happening, what do you think that is? Honestly, fucking minimal is my answer. A lot of people don't give a shit when they've left relationships. They don't. And you really need to think about that. Having seen the devastation when the dominant partner dies, please plan ahead. I would totally agree with that. I would also argue if you go to much older relationships, my mum died in May, and watching my dad is really interesting. They've been together for 60 plus years of their life, and they are those very traditional people. My dad's kind of had to learn how to clean. He could sort of cook. He certainly didn't know how to use the washing machine. Like, the devastation is similar. And often what you'll get with a lot of older women who are left alone is they don't know how to pay the bills. So we had a very bad 24 hours in my family, in that my sister's father-in-law died, who we were all very close to. Her brother-in-law had a major heart attack and needed open heart surgery, and then my mum died. It was a very rough 27 hours for my sister and her kids especially. My dad is coping pretty well without my mum. My sister's father-in-law, the mum, is honestly, she she can't cope at all. She doesn't know how to do things. She doesn't know what's going on in her life about finances or anything else at all. So we need to start planning for these things, which means educating, which means helping, which means talking about these things. That's half the battle. When I die, or if you die first, or if I die, this is what I want to happen. This is what you need to do. So the pre-morteming really comes into it. The sort of issues that are going to happen are going to be around finances, are going to be around life management, they go possibly around sex and sexual things, and certainly around play and different things as well. What do I do with a person's clothes? What do I do with that stuff that reminds me of them? I'm a big believer as a submissive rather than a slave, of having all my own toys, so they're mine and it's how I work with. It's a bit different. Cinder says, I've had so many calls from customers when I worked with a bank where typically women in their 70s have no idea how to access their bank accounts after their husbands have died. And actually often what you'll find is because of the way they have their bank accounts, the women can't access the money when somebody's died. And then the person's got no money to pay for the funeral, no money to do all these things. Now, funerals are great things because what funeral directors do, which is fantastic, is they let you borrow the money from them without interest, and you pay from the estate. Often that can happen as well. It happens a lot. There's so much paperwork that needs doing. And that's another thing. Like, I know a few people here, and a few of them are my friends who've just lost people. I know, Jerry, would you mind me saying you? No, okay. So Jerry's in a situation where his mum died before my mum did, and the estate was very held up in paperwork and all sorts of bits and pieces. You've got to learn how to do these things before you start. Learn what happens when somebody dies. Learn what happens when someone breaks up. Learn about the legal, what's allowed and what isn't. If you can get a power of attorney, Mel C says, so for example, my sister and I have complete power of attorney over my parents. We've also made their wills mirror wills, back-to-back wills, and we've also made sure that the way they own their house is very specific, so that if one of them had dementia or was taken into a home, the government can't force the other one out. In the UK, you may not know this, if one of the partners ends up being very, very ill and you are taken into a home and you own a house, the government can force you to sell the house depending on the ownership of the house. So whatever you do, make sure you've got the correct form of ownership for your parents of their house, because otherwise that parent has nowhere left to live. And it's
we had problems getting probate granted on my mother's estate because although she left a will leaving everything to me and my sister, there's no one else contesting it, just the two of us. There was a problem with the wording of the will. What do you do? One of the witnesses had
coke down my tits.
One of the witnesses had worded her statement incorrectly, and the will was rejected. We had to find this woman who 30 years ago had witnessed my mother's will and find her and get us to write an affidavit. But yeah, it was a big problem.
It is. And it's also, if you think about that sort of thing, it's really serious. One of my clients sent me this really sad link the other day. I wanted to write about it actually, whereby a woman whose husband had died found out that he'd been having a 10-year affair after her husband had died. And how do you deal with that, and what do you do? And actually she needs to go to therapy, and that is the only answer for her. That nothing else will work because there are lots of things that she can do. But this is the same principle even about DS. It is like someone dying. The lack of them is so overwhelming if they have a very big impact in your life. However, I'm also going to say it's not dissimilar to a vanilla breakup, depending on the dependency. A lot of vanilla couples have a lot of dependency going on. One does this, one does that. I don't know when the fucking bins come over. Look, I live alone. Every job in my house is a lilac job. It's not a blue job. It's not a pink job. It's a lilac job in the middle. Purple. Picture, I don't fucking give a shit how deep or intense or whatever it is. If something needs doing or gluing, I have to do it. If it needs sorting, I have to do it. And so look, there's little things you have to plan and think about for yourself. I think it's really good as well. If you are a person who is in charge and dominant, teach your submissive how to do everything as part of your fucking responsibility to their lives if they don't know how to. And again, I'm not talking about gender, because we can have non-binary, female, male. I don't give a shit who you are. It doesn't matter. Anyone can be on the top. Anyone can be on the bottom. Gender, sexuality, religion, kind of nothing matters here. What matters here is if you want to be a really good dominant, empower your slave, your submissive, on how to do these things for themselves as well. And that they choose and do things slightly differently. And that's all done away in a pre-mortem and doing different things. So Cinder said, and they had inadvertently breached data protection, so no info could be given over the phone. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrendous for anyone to go through. Al says, my grandma was terrified of red bills when widowed, but also cross about how much she discovered grandpa spent on the pools each week. oh, yeah, I really get that. That makes me smile in an affectionate way, because when you die or when you leave or things happen, that's when everything gets found out, you know, everything. I took my mum's phone. There was nothing on it. God, my mum was so clean. She was so squeaky clean and so good. But fuck me, it might not have been that way. Like, it's really interesting to look at. So death is something to plan for, to think about, how to clean things up, how to make it okay, so part of that responsibility, if you are a dominant, please teach your submissive how to do those things. It's a really good thing to do. I'm going to teach you how to do these things. We're going to make a video of it together. I'm going to leave you a video so you've got these. I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to leave my bank account so that we can both access it. This one particularly, and it's always got the minimum in for this. And there's this one over here that will always cover a funeral or do these different things. And you're going to speak to this person and this person about it. Sort of like kink executors, if you like, who know how to do things, who can live life. So pick a kink executor. Tom says, having just ended a long-term DS relationship, marriage, and dealing with the fallout now, pre-mortem planning would have been smart in hindsight. Look, do I think it always pays off? No, because I think people are cunts. So no, like, people just go, fuck it, I don't care, it's not my problem, I'm off, I've got a better model, a different model, or I can't bear being with you, or they've died, or whatever. That's always a problem. However, if you're a decent human, think of this angle, think of these aspects of making these things okay. And pre-morteming is the key, always. So the exit strategies are started at the beginning. When I work with couples who are really in trouble with their DS relationships or MS relationships, I do this whole thing about bronzes, silvers, and gold rules. We have a completely different strategy. I teach communication skills. I teach how easy it is to do DS and MS, actually, if you want to, by planning and all those sorts of things. And then after that, what we also then do is the exit strategy for the whole relationship. And so many people go, I don't want to do that. And I say, why? Because it means we'll break up. And I went, what if it means you'll realize what you might miss, so it might help you stay together? What if it means if you do ever break up because of things you can't control, that at least it's done in a better way? That's the difference. Cinder says, personally, I'm in the process of creating a box of instructions to be followed in the event of my death. My dad hates the idea, but it will make things easier for those who will be left behind to try and sort things out. I have my funeral prepaid. I have everything sorted, the flowers, everything. My children don't have to worry about anything. Absolutely nothing. It's all done and it's all sorted. With a particular the same people that buried my mum, because I sorted it out with them. They know exactly what coffin I want. I want a wicker coffin. I want white flowers around it. Everyone knows. It makes life so much easier. It is way better. And as somebody who was really ill 2 years ago, because I know I'm going to say it again, I had cancer, you start planning about these things. You really do, because it's good. Pre-morteming, I have a friend who has a key to my house that I've asked to clear the house of my kink stuff, if possible, before my kids come in when I die. My kids know about my kink. I think they might fight over some of my toys, and the rest of it will be given to other people, I'm sure. So it won't be as bad, but they know. So actually, I think Darcy will have more. Mel C, do people still have contracts in DS relationships? Perhaps this can be a clause. Yes, and actually what I do with vanilla people is also make them have contracts. But the problem is with DS relationships, we just put the DS in there. Actually, what we need to do is put the vanilla in there as well, because a lot of the issues that are created are actually quite vanilla. How do you sort out paying this? How do you do that? What do I do? How do I learn this? So the contracts need to be life contracts, and they're not legally obliging contracts. This is what we'll do if this happens, this is how we split this up, this is what we'll do. And I would argue that most people don't do DS contracts anymore. Some people do. They're a bit out of fashion. I think that's a shame, because it can really help with this sort of stuff, especially if you have an exit strategy written within it as well. MacBook says, to Cinders, they've done the same, made me realize a number of challenges that I hadn't considered, which is exactly the fucking point. When you sit down with somebody and you start working this stuff out, you go, oh my God, what about that? I hadn't thought of that. Fuck, you're right. Yes. Oh my God. It's really important. How do you handle the exit strategy if you haven't planned it beforehand? On the fucking fly. That's the problem, isn't it? You're going to have to try and sort that out as it goes. And you're going to have to look for help. You could try and speak to the other person and say, I need an exit strategy because I'm dependent or you're dependent. Or you could ask, what is it you need from me right now in order to make this okay? Namori says, before my ex and I moved in together, we agreed the separation of joint libraries, to the horror of her sister. That was about the only part of the breakup that was civilized, probably because you planned it in some way, shape or form. So make sure if in a long distance relationship, someone can give yourself funeral arrangements in case of sudden death. Look, I'm also going to say there are plenty of people who keep their kink side completely separate. And the vanilla people on this side do not know about it at all. You also have people who have affairs. When you have a relationship, when you're having an affair where it's non-ethical and it's not open, where somebody is a secret, then it's really difficult because they will never go to a funeral. They might even never be told. The person just disappears. And that's really complex. We've got to think about those things. Could you tell someone at least to tell me? You know, if you're in a very long distance or a different country relationship, or you are an affair, you have to think about these things. So for Miss Vegan Vixen, if you don't have a strategy plan, start now. If you're already in a breakup, it's probably a bit too late. Then it becomes, okay, these are all the problems I'm facing. Who can I go to for this? Who can I ask about that? Where do I get support from this? And how can I do that? Sometimes for me as a therapist, I'm not dealing with people's emotions. I'm teaching them how to write a fucking letter to the council. Sometimes I'm teaching them how to make a phone call to somebody. Like, it's not always about therapy. It's really interesting. So there are people around us that can help and do these things. There are. She got all the Pratchetts. Oh no, was that chosen beforehand? If you like Terry Pratchett, you'll understand that. So you have to make sure in some way that you've had this discussion beforehand. And if you're not going to have it with the other person, at least have it with yourself. Set it up, leave lots of envelopes, leave lots of things that you think about for the sake of the other person, especially if you've tied that person in so tight that they depend on you for all their okayness. I left my slave 2 years ago and he still looks to me for support, which I'm happy to do, but he still wants to get back together. Okay. Honestly, Miss Vegan Vixen, if that's the case and that's carrying on, I think you have to put a time limit and a time frame on it to say, I'm happy to support you, but that's all it will ever be. The problem is the more support you give, the more likely that person is to believe that you are coming back. So sometimes the kindest thing to do is to say, I'm going to teach you all of these things within the next 6 months, and then I'm done. That's the end. And that sounds really cruel, but it goes back to that cruel to be kind. I'm going to pick you up on that comment. When you say, I've tried going cold turkey, it doesn't work. Yes, it does. You just didn't do it for long enough, or you didn't hold the boundaries. Person came back and said something, I just can't deal with it. Please help me. It's not going to happen. I can't live without you. Help. I'm going to kill myself and all these other things. And we give in. So that's part of the principle as well. When we say nothing works, it means we haven't seen it through, because there's no way nothing works. Something always works eventually. It's all about boundaries, consequences, and what we're willing to put in, sadly. Good old boundaries. Mel C, COVID has hindered some of the options for arranging funerals. Oh God, it totally has, believe me. It hindered my mum's, and that was even in May, and you could still have 30 people. No, it's not true. You could have more people in my mum's funeral, but you couldn't feed more than 30. And we had way more. So it's you know, so we decided not to do food for anybody, because who do you just invite for food? So we just went out as a family afterwards, just literally family. So her grandchildren, her children and her husband, and it was much easier to, actually it was quite pleasant. So the problem is, when you say I've tried going cold turkey, then you haven't gone cold turkey. You have to say, warn someone, this is what's happening, this is going to happen, and it does happen, and you have to stick with it. The boundaries are really important. Karis, even though I'm the S-type, I'm the organizer in my relationship, so I'm intending to help my partners deal with wills and powers of attorney, things like that, hopefully before it becomes critical. Really important to do it early. We even had a DNR put through on my mum, which my sister and I had a copy of, and all sorts of things. And for those of you who don't know, a DNR is a do not resuscitate order. Jerry, we had 9 people at my mum's funeral, I remember, and we all sat in separate pews, and it's utterly cold and horrendous, isn't it? It is so, but of course, what happens here is then we all assume that Jerry had a certain form of relationship with his mum, you know, and it's interesting, isn't it, that we all have different forms of relationships with people, and we miss them in different ways, and that's really important to think about as well. You know, how much does someone love someone? How much are they going to miss them? What does it mean is all really important too. So pre-morteming really is the key here. It's the strategies that you use at the beginning to set up for the end. It sounds really hard on you, Vegan Vixen. It is about boundaries. You need to step out, give a warning, the next 3 months, bring it down, I'm done then, and then it stopped. But it stopped forever. I was seriously stalked. People know about this quite a few years ago. I thought it would never end. It was so difficult. Like, some people here knew about it. You know, I was saying to them, God, they might turn up here. There's a fear here. God, what's going to happen? And it was absolutely horrendous. I was scared every time I went to an event. They knew my timetable. They knew where I lived. They have photographs outside the back and the front of my house telling me they were going to kill themselves. I just thought it would never end. It was absolutely horrendous. It does end. And the person didn't die. I went 1.5 years without contact and thought we could be friends. Nope. There you go. That's the problem. No, done. Not friends, not ever. That boundary is now changed. I went 1.5 years without contact and thought we could be friends. You can't. It's really obvious you can't. Stop. I'm really sorry, but that's probably the most sensible answer. Okay, so how to create a long-term relationship with kink. Do you start with play, get to know one another first, hold off on kink? I'm just reading that, I need my glasses on. Hold off on sex. If so, how do you avoid setting unwanted precedents if you dive in head first? If you want to set up a long-term relationship with kink, you need a good balance, potentially, of kink and vanilla, which means not playing, not having sex. What it does mean to me, however, is start slowly. If you go in with a mountain and a rush of all these things that you're going to do, rather than building it up and making sure that things work, it's like if you go in with a whole set of rules of how people are going to live. Right, here's your rule book, and you open it up and it's like a fucking thing like this, or it's a document that's got 35 pages. The person can't possibly follow it. We get into habits and we get into different things. So start small with kink. Start small, set up patterns, create success. When you create success, good boy, good girl, well done. I really love this. Oh, thanks, that's really nice. Then we build. And it's a slow build rather than an all-in, eat all you want buffet, which you're going to end up vomiting, going back to the eating disorders. You're going to end up vomiting it all back out again. If you start slow, so sometimes the rules, I know, don't hate me, are right. They strongly advocate for cutting people off completely after a breakup, and often it really works. Yes, depending on what's happening. For sure. My husband and I have just stepped into the kink world, and we have been together 10 years. It is a slow process, as there are many aspects. Yes. And do the things that you really enjoy doing together. But also, really boringly, like the first one, pre-mortem it all. Have a look at what do you want your kink to look like. When I work with people, especially couples or polycules, and especially when it comes to kink, understand words. I would like to experiment. What does that mean? You know, no, I don't. I understand what it means in the dictionary. I don't understand what it means to you or to me. What do you mean? Well, I'd quite like to meet other people. Oh, where did that come from? That's completely different. Other people for what? What do you mean? Have really long conversations about what you're both agreeing to, about what it looks like, and start to introduce things. Test the waters, play, have a really good time, enjoy it. However, if you just go down the kink route, and you ignore vanilla, then your relationship will potentially not last particularly very long term, depending on what both people want. Okay, so people are going back to Aisha Adonis says, my birth mother died not long after COVID arrived, and due to direct family, I couldn't attend. It really happens, doesn't it? And it's more common than people think, and it's awful. The proper sons and daughters took up all the places available due to restrictions. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Proper, like who's got a claim to something, and that sounds really sad, and I feel for you. And Jerry says that's shit, and Carrie says that's sad. Cinders goes back to the point we were making. Contact needs to be cut in that aspect. I was ghosted by my last dom and sent him emails, etc. during the week. Each day I gave him clear instructions as to what would happen if he continued to ignore me. Well, a week later I blocked him and let him be, as I need to look after myself. He later found me on another platform that I'd not blocked him on, and he came groveling. So predictable. But I kept my boundaries and blocked him there too. It can seem harsh on the outside, but with some people you have to cut all ties. You absolutely do. And if people play with you, even at the beginning, whatever, block, cut out, get rid of. It's not ghosting. If you said, this is what I'm doing, please be aware, there is a consequence, you need to stick to it. And I would really recommend that you do that. So let's go back to how to create long-term relationships, especially around kink. If you want a purely slave dynamic, so like we've got people in here who have like often, you know, there's somebody who has a set of slaves with him, and there's, you know, they're a family, for example. So, I don't think they're in today, but they're often around. Even if you're in a slave dynamic, part of that is vanilla. Part of that is day-to-day life in some way, shape or form. Cats just come in. So you have to look at that aspect as well. How do we deal with day-to-day stuff? What is it that we do? How are we going to grow this? How do we want to develop it? It's really boring to have a lot of these conversations, but they stop a lot of the shit and they help relationships carry on. Relationships are at first. I've got a specific writing on relationship stages, which I know Memoria is now going to go on the hunt for. Right? So we have these things called relationship stages. Whether you're in DS, whether you're in MS, whether you're in BDSM, whether you're in vanilla, a collection of all of those. People go through natural stages in relationships, and they're cyclical often. They can come and start. Often that first bit isn't there. And there are different forms of love that we have as well, or adoration, or isn't. Like, we have this very strange as well. Please, if you want a long-term relationship, check your fucking fantasy at the door. The problem with a lot of BDSM relationships is they're full of bullshit fantasy. They just don't make any sense. Vegan Vixen says, as a woman, I often come across men who are new and all they want to do is play. I'm not interested in being their fetish dispensary. Completely agree with you. That it's about developing a relationship. Look, if you just want to play, have a fantastic time. I mean, great. Isn't that wonderful that we can do that? However, if you want to develop a relationship, I do know you. Well, I appreciate you, I think, is more the word, Memoria. So, but stages of relationships are quite natural to go through, whether you're in BDSM or not. So it's all about making sure that we make this work, set it up. What you'll find in a lot of BDSM relationships, and honestly, especially long-term relationships, what happens is they turn very vanilla. Anyone had that here ever before? So you're in a relationship, it's kinky, and all of a sudden it goes vanilla. And you're like, what the fuck? What happened there? Why did that happen? And it's because a lot of the kink is kind of spent at the beginning. It's very much based on sexual elements. It happens to so many people and most people. And Cinders, I agree with you. The amount of doms who just want to fuck and go, eat shoots and leaves, pandas. I'm not so keen. So like I want a developed relationship, so different. So how do you then go from play to a relationship? Well, play is a form of relationship, isn't it? But it's all about how you start, and it's all about how do you then, which bit? So how do you go from a relationship, or which bit are you asking how? It doesn't help that I'm also my husband's carer. We do a bit of DS, but it's a seldom thing these days. Yes, it makes a difference. And when we start caring for someone, and that's a real difference as well, because when we start having caring come into it, a lot of the sexual stuff will just disappear because we have too much responsibility and too much care. And it's well known that a lot of people who care for people, their sexual elements very rarely come back. Relationships evolve and change. Negotiation or renegotiation is important, and or checking in every month or so to make sure all parties are comfortable and happy. And Jerry says, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I sometimes wonder when my need for kink will subside if I'm in a satisfying relationship. And the truth is, both of those are right. It might. I personally, in my long-term relationships, always do want some form of kink. I've noticed that. It's the other people who then drift off and don't. No matter how satisfying the relationship is, the kink is really important to me. And it's all about checking in and making sure. It's all about not demanding from the other person that this is the way it is. It's all about talking and negotiation, even if you're in a DS relationship. It's really important. Somebody said to sit down. I would recommend a weekly sit down. I would recommend a weekly review. There are lots of like in polyamory, they have things like radar meetings. There's all these trendy words that are going around, which, you know, it's just basically sitting down and having a look at what is it we want to talk about? How are we going to get it? How do we know what happened from last time? What is it we want moving forward? I'm the point where I'm considering kink altogether. I rather find and create a healthy, loving, long-term relationship. Ideally, I'd have a sprinkle of DS, but I'd be happy with a loving, long-term relationship. I'm going to argue they're not that easy to find. Anyway, I've been on the dating scene for, I would say, for the last 6 years. I have seen a few people on and off. Yes, okay, I had cancer for 2 years and COVID for 2 years. I'm finding it really hard to connect with people and find someone who I would connect with who's right for me. So I understand that we want to leave kink because we think it's kink that's the problem, but actually it isn't. It is the world and humans and us that are the problem. We have to look at what is it that I'm doing, what is it the other person's doing. Well, I think one of the things, especially in relationships, if you want a long-term or a loving relationship and you meet someone as a play partner, sometimes when you have built a friendship, actually those relationships can be very rewarding and very good, but you need to be able to have that conversation to take it to the next level. However, if you say to someone, I only want you as a play partner, that's all I want, if you are not being true to yourself, then eventually when you ask for more, we wonder why we get kicked in the face. It's really difficult. Going from a vanilla relationship to a kink one might frighten them away as they don't understand it. And that depends on the people involved. If you look at the statistics, I've mentioned them before, 6% of the UK population are queer in some way, shape or form, 4% are polyamorous, over 80% have tried some form of kink. And Summers is just a step to the right as you go in. It's not that difficult. You can find all these things. People have done some aspect of kink. A lot of people are quite interested in pleasing their partner. However, if that's the only reason you do it and you get no pleasure out of it, it's very unlikely to work. I deal with that a lot of the time, where two people just want completely different things. And if you're not willing to meet in the middle, then the relationship won't work long term anyway. You have to be able to meet and come together about what's wanted. A lot of people all of a sudden want a long-term relationship with somebody that they've maybe been a play partner with, as I said. But if you started out without the right way of asking for it, then that person very clearly states, but I don't want that. I don't want monogamy, for example. I want polyamory. I want 6 partners. I want this and I want that. But you're like, no, but I wanted to be your only partner. I thought if I showed you what I was, that you'd maybe take it. You have to look at your journey. You have to look at the messages you gave out and what it meant as well. If you start to get feelings for somebody and you want something from them, it's really important to say. It's really important to say quite quickly. Honestly, because you're better off leaving and going if it's not reciprocated and looking for something else than you are waiting and staying for the next 6 months, hoping that they'll eventually see. There's something. And in a long-term relationship, if you want kink to work, it's about making it easy for yourself. So again, pre-morteming, having plans about how we bring kink in. Look, it's really boring, but you also need to plan your kink in and plan your DS in and everything else as well. When I meet people who say, you know, I've kind of gone off kink, it's a bit boring now, or it's this or it's that, it's too much hard work, I can't fucking be bothered. Well, there's an irony, because I often hear that from dominants. It takes very little work to make a submissive do what you want them to do. And if you tell them to fuck off and leave you alone for 20 minutes, you've just made them happy. There's a real irony in that. You have this incredible amount of power that you could actually use to make you happy. I can't fucking stand it. She's on my back as soon as I walk in the door about wanting to play or please me. Well, I'll tell you what would be really clever. Stand outside the fucking front door for 2 seconds, write a text that says, sweetheart, regardless of gender, or you fucking dirty whatever, take your pick. When I come in, don't talk to me. Leave me alone. Go and get my slippers. Go and get my pipe. I don't know how old you are or whatever. Or go and get my whatever. Or get me a gin and tonic. Leave it on my table. Go away. You may come back in 30 minutes. And then you knock on the door and you ask if you can come in. She's thrilled, he's thrilled, they're thrilled that you're even doing this stuff. And you still get what you want. It's with such a small amount of effort. This is what's ironic. This is the beauty of power exchange. We just want to feel useful. We just want to be told what to do half the time and how to please. There's a real irony in that. So if we can get that going, that can really help. That can really make a difference. And once and when my dom and I moved from being almost exclusively play dynamic based to a stronger, more emotional relationship, still with a dynamic present, if that makes sense, the transition is possible. It surprised us both. I've had that happen to me as well. It can absolutely happen when you don't expect it to. And often the best things are. And we do know that relationships that start in friendship, which is what you'd have had in some way, shape or form, actually can end up being stronger relationships long term. I feel sorry for the doms who have brats or bratty subs. Well, do you know what I think about brats and bratty subs? What they really want is control. What they really want is to be noticed. What they're really saying most of the time is, what about me? And actually, if they got that, that brattiness would start to decrease as it goes. It really would, because there's nothing to be bratty about. Well, I'm going to do this then. That's okay. We can sort that out. And then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. Yeah, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, then we're going to do that. All right, get out of my head. Yeah, so there is, you know, we play up because we want something. If you think about the naughty teenager, they really want to be noticed. Like children who get punished, it's better to be punished than ignored. So that's what we're asking for if we're a bit bratty sometimes as well. It makes a difference. So it's all about negotiating. It's all about being really honest with your feelings. It's all about asking what you want. I think having good kink and good sex at the beginning is absolutely what you're basing the relationship on. So don't hold back on kink. Don't hold back on sex. Build things up, maybe slowly. You can make it really exciting. We're not going to sleep together for 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 3 months. We're going to build up. We're going to do this. We're going to play. We're going to do that. That can be really fun. Most people are just interested in getting their dick wet very quickly, or their cunt filled, or whatever, or their arse, or, you know, these things happen very quickly. There's nothing wrong with that. That can be fantastic and really great. Depends what you're trying to develop. Plus, if you do have sex and play up front, what you can also realize is it is shit. And you might not want to stay around for it. And a lot of people aren't very good at sex. A lot of people aren't very good at play. And you then have to work out, do I stay to educate? Do I stay to make this better? Is this what I want? Is this my place? And actually, sometimes it can be quite a good idea to work out, actually, this sex and play isn't good and it doesn't work. So that needs working on as well. However, sex and play can get better. People can come together, make it work, educate each other, teach each other, and that can help as well and make a real difference. So the key to all of this, to the last two, is all about going slow and pre-morteming and planning. On the subject of brats, does a Dom really want a doormat? Just say it. I'm going to argue I'm not a brat at all. I'm also not a fucking doormat. I don't have to be bratty at all. It's not my thing. I don't do it. However, I'm not easy. Everything's negotiated, spoken about. Oh, no, I'm not doing that. No, thanks. That's definitely not for me. If you could just wear heels, no, they fuck my back. I don't want to. Yeah, but I want you to. If we were in a relationship and I really loved you, I might do it occasionally because you've earned that from me, and vice versa. So I don't think it's always that easy. I don't think submissives are people who should just say yes all the time either. I think both sides have to earn it and make sure it works. I wouldn't say that was always the way. When I started in the 80s, I would argue that if you didn't say yes to everything, you weren't included in anything. I'm a stroppy sub. I don't think I am. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm a dominatrix in sheep's clothing. Who knows? One day. I seem to get a lot of those sort of approaches. You know, I might come out one day. I haven't come out in 39 years. I doubt I'm ever going to. I don't. It's just not in my nature. However, I'm really strong on negotiation and working out because I want it to last. I want it to be better. I want to be better in it. I want to grow from it. And I think when you throw yourself in and you just have sex and you just have play, it can be really great and really fun. But where's the substance in order to go forward? Dominatrix in sheep's clothing. Well, you know, I wear furs, darling. I don't actually. That's not true. Don't ever go at me. I don't wear fur. You know what I mean? So it's you have to work out, if you chuck everything in at the beginning and you throw in all of your cards, what have you got left? Relationships at the beginning, if you look at that writing from earlier, I don't wear fur. It's really important. I know, Lola, you always look at incredibly glamorous, so I know your style and what you look like. I wear wool. Yeah, I wear a lot of cotton. So it's really important to find that balance of progressing a relationship. I love the idea of collaring at different stages. It's a very old-fashioned idea of like a collar of consideration, for example. So if you look back in time when they used to do it, there used to be different things that people used to have to do to achieve. Now all of a sudden the person's owned and collared within 2 weeks. How is that possible? You don't even know each other. Like, what's happening there? Taz says, I found love got in the way of our relationship. Yes, it can if it's DS. A lot of people who end up loving then start to get into that love system of how can I hurt the person I love? How can I control the person I love? Mark, a sub who knows their limits and is being a clear communicator, yay. I would agree with you on that because that's what I believe. Nemoria, on a serious note, wool is one of the best fabrics on par with silk. Oh, I love a bit of silk, me. Silk pillows for your hair. Right, so it's all about communication. It's all about building something together, which is why I love the different systems of collars that you can get. As I said before, I think that's a really good idea. So you know what you're aiming towards. You're building up. My husband struggles with dominating as he doesn't want to hurt me. So he doesn't struggle with dominating, he struggles with hurting you in play. They're different things, don't mix them up. Domination is a mindset, domination around things, around tasks and different things that you can do. If he doesn't want to hurt you, there are different things he can do in the bedroom. And also maybe what he needs to test and push a little bit, so you've got a little bit of play going on, is that actually when he squeezes or does this, you quite like it. So it's all about your responses as well. It's actually about you coaching and teaching him that it's okay, because it's going to go against every message that he's been taught growing up as a man, that you shouldn't hurt women and you certainly shouldn't hurt the person you love. We're told that consistently. Older men are definitely have been taught that for most of their lives, and that's a real problem for a lot of people. So that takes some real work to overcome. It doesn't mean he can't dominate you, it means he's not going to hurt you in play. So are there other things where you can do that and show that that's how it is, so he can start to trust the process? Ironically, when someone's pulling away, you need to lean in more. I'm not saying that's easy. You are right about that. Collaring, I haven't come across it much in real life, but it was mentioned on the BDSM stories I used to read before. I think it is an old-fashioned idea, but I think it's quite nice to work towards something. Yeah, there's physical hurt and emotional hurt. Sometimes there's a difference between hurt and harm. And that's a really good point. It's a really good conversation to have. It's a really good conversation to say, hey, it might be quite a nice idea if we do this, do that, and work in different ways. So, I mean, we used to joke about collars. We used to talk about Velcro collars and all sorts of different things. And they do mean different things, but there are different types of collars and different types of relationships as well for us to be part of that you can look at. So it's really worth looking at. So you've got your collar of consideration. That's really nice. I'm considering this person to be in my life. This person is now onto a training collar. So this person is being trained by me and we are training each other in these things. Or it could be that this person is under my protection. You can have a collar of protection. You can have a collar where it's just for play. Oh, there you go. Someone's put something up. So you can look at different things. And some people use collars in the evenings, in bed. Some people use them in the day. They use different things. But for me, what I'm interested in is a collar consideration, a training collar, and then an ownership collar. Not the whole on for play and different things. I know an S-type who's been collared to 2 doms in a day as exclusive relationships. Good going. Okay, help me out here. If you're in a DS relationship, which is a power exchange, how can you have 2 people telling you what to do? What if they clash? It doesn't quite work. Because okay, if it's that one on that day and that one on another, but if they're concurrent at the same time, it can't work. My husband gave me an eternity collar for our 10th wedding anniversary. Most people think it's just a necklace. How beautiful. And yes, and for sure. And it's really lovely. Or a ring, like an eternity ring, any of those things. And Cindy was just thinking, I was thinking the same thing. It's very difficult. I had one client who was very insecure, female submissive, and she was speaking to 11 dominants online. 11 she was pleasing every day. She was very busy. She only went on to meet a few of them. Fuck me. Separate relationships as in non-concurrent. Yeah, okay. So, but you know, that's all a bit serious, isn't it? Very quickly. I think collaring is akin to marriage. I really do. I think it's a very serious thing to do. It's a real thing. Yes, it can work if everyone is clear about their boundaries and what they're doing and how it works. And that's the key, is communication. But isn't that what we're talking about all the way through? Everything about this is about communication, about working. Although the folk who know what it is can make it a good opener for conversation. I agree. She doesn't, obviously. Yeah, I really get all of that. So so Mark says the psychology of pain and masochism is probably its own session. Pain can produce endorphins to generate. I've got a whole writing on pain actually that covers all of that, or it's probably finding it right now, but I've got a whole writing on pain fully. Whilst the submasochist is having their conscious mind is being so distracted they don't really notice or experience any pain. I wrote about that. I've written about that, and I wrote about it a little bit today because I spoke about is subspace addictive, was a writing I did earlier on today. So, because some people, I was asked, that was my 8 o'clock question this morning. Do you think subspace is addictive? Whoa, straight in. Let's go. That was at 8 o'clock. So it's been a long day. So again, with all of these things, let me go back to it. So eating disorders is something different. I gave a couple of tips, things that you could use. It's very shame-based. You can read that shame writing. I think that's really important. This is all about relationships. It's all about what you negotiate and how much you talk. When you sign up for work, you sign a contract that covers the minutiae of what you're doing. You need to do this much, whether it takes all day or whether you're going to leave by 5, it covers everything. But into the relationship that takes the biggest part of your time with another human, you don't do any of that. You don't do any of the discussions about how it is. So it's really important, thank you, Memoria, it's really, really important we do have these discussions so they can be really exciting. It's really sexy to talk about this stuff. People think it isn't. It means you're going to have a better long-term relationship, especially if you get rid of the fairy tale at the door. BDSM is covered with fairy tales about how it's going to be, what it means, about what people expect. I've seen a picture, I've seen it in a book, that means that. Fuck me, I wrote the other day about reality. It's got to be real and it's got to work in reality. If it doesn't, what's the point of trying it or having it? Because it just doesn't work. So I think reality really matters. Right, next week we're starting with how to overcome being let down by daddy. So that's all about disappointment and how we overcome disappointment and how we handle that sort of pain. And if you've got any other questions, we'll add those in next week as well. Thank you all very much for coming. Been lovely to see you all. I hope everyone's got a little something out of today. Thank you, and I will see you all next week. If you want to come, as always, you're welcome to, completely free of charge. I also have a coffee if you want to buy me a coffee, or I have a Patreon. You don't have to, you really don't. And if you are here, Karis, I'll probably owe you about 105 now. If you are here as a person who is in any form of psychology and you want a career professional development certificate or a certificate of professional development, let me know. I'll give you one of those as well, and they're for free too. Unless I owe 100, which I do to the odd person. And so if there's any question that you have that you want to learn from or about that everyone can talk about here, let me know, come back to me, and we'll add it into any of the things that we do. So anything to do with psychology, communication, anything to do with kink, anything to do with mental health, well-being, any of those things, I can cover it all, she says. For CPD, do we message you on FetLife? Yeah, just chuck it at me. Chuck it at me, tell me what you want. Remind me 30 times before you get it, but it will happen. It's quite a few. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully we can cover more next time as well. I really appreciate you all. Time for our wankerish wave. Thanks from Finland still. Thank you, Raven Tully. It was great. See you all later. Take care. Bye.